Still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Okay, now it's recording. I'll trim it. Hey, it's Joe Glines, and today we're going to be looking at logging into a website. We're going to have a couple examples, and I actually have a guest here, Hellbent from another channel. He does a lot of videos with AutoHotkey. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, this is Hall Bent, and like Joe said, I have another channel where I create AutoHotkey videos. I've been using AutoHotkey now for about a year and a half, and when I was first learning it, I found that there wasn't a huge amount of resources, so I could just suffer with what I had, or I could actually try to change that, and that's what I've done.
That's and so which I've said before, right? I'm not a programmer. I fake it pretty well, but I stumbled upon his videos. A lot of them are based off of GUIs, which I know very little about, and so I was so grateful he's creating the tutorials because he also does a good job, especially the newer ones, breaking them into smaller, compartmentalized sizes that are very specific that make it easy to learn, this exact thing, and it's really helpful. But we thought, hey, you know what? It'd be fun to do a video where we have a discussion about working through a script instead of me just blabbering on, right? We'll have, he can pepper in questions or we can have discussions about it, which is another great way to learn. I learn a lot more even when I'm doing it, right? Because he'll have knowledge on things that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, and with this particular case, Joe's going to be doing something that we haven't rehearsed any of this, like what he's going to be doing, and I've never seen what he's going to do. I have absolutely no idea how to do what he's going to be doing. So I'm from the perspective of a person who's never encountered this before, and I'll be able to actually ask him questions that a person who's never done it before might want to ask, because he knows this stuff. He does this a lot, so he might not necessarily know the kind of things that people might want to ask about it.
Yeah, which is that's where our skill sets are awesome, because they are very different, and so he can, again, it's easy to start assuming people understand the context of what you're explaining, and because I've been doing it for a long time, we all start from scratch, right? And we slowly learn them, but it's just been a while since I've had to remember what it's like to do this fresh, and so that's what I think it'll be very valuable on this. So let's talk about the overall thing that we're going to cover today, and we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty about web scraping stuff, but we're basically going to tackle of, hey, when you're going to log into any website, right, there's generally, it's a form on a web page, and here I have a couple examples. So here's Facebook, and here's the, you'll have either an email or something, and then the password. On Amazon, of course, it's email, password. LinkedIn, oh, look, they're using email, password, and then there's always like a submit button, because after you enter these, you need to either click something or hit enter. Pinterest, it looks like it doesn't tell you there. On Craigslist, it's email or handle, right? But there's still this basic structure on almost any website where you are logging in, right? You're going to have your name, and then generally speaking, you'll have a password to make sure that you are who you say you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to show these. Now, here's the thing about web pages, right? Unlike doing stuff in Excel, which is very structured and things happen in a certain way, and for how about for you for GUIs, right? Every AutoHotkey GUI you create, there's generally speaking a standard pattern that you will do things in a certain way, that this parameter is always used here, and it's a edit field, and I want to put in the text there, and so this is how I'm going to do it. Right.
Okay, so my ability to access the different sections of it.
Yeah, and then you'll know. Hold on a second. You'll know by looking at the controls and also with the AutoHotkey help exactly how to do what you want. Right. It's a standard way. The difference with web pages is everything in their mother. I mean, people create web pages very, very differently. Companies, even within a given company, like on Facebook, they will use different ways to use HTML to populate these values, and it's all done very differently. So it's
not a one size fit all.
That's right. Yeah, it's I would say when you first start it, it's very frustrating. Once you start learning it, it's you have to realize each page is different, right? And even on a given company, on a different domain, the forms can be filled out differently, and you have to use different syntax to populate them. So I have a script. I'm going to use. I'll have a link to it in the tutorial. But this is my tool. This I hate the name of this thing. The IWB2 Learner tool. What this does is it works with Internet Explorer. And everything we're doing today will be in Internet Explorer because AutoHotkey can create a COM object, which means I can basically programmatically create an existence of IE, and I can really access everything programmatically. But what I can do is
So you're not just going to be sending clicks.
That's right, which is, technically I think you could argue that sending tab like one time got me there. I could paste in my email, hit tab again, paste in this, hit tab again, and hit my enter key, right? That might work. However, if Facebook changes if they add another form over here, right, another edit field, or have it where the tab leaves you somewhere else, it can constantly change, right? Mm-hmm. Besides the whole thing of like, well, did the page load in time? Was it actually visible? Did they move in? Now there's another button here, or there's so many things that can change that sending clicks, mouse clicks, or keystrokes, and you don't know what one you're in when you do it, and that's why doing it this way is much more robust, right? Where you're not just sending keystrokes, which I'm not knocking, right? Sometimes that's the way to do it. But hey, if you
I think that would be like using a sledgehammer when you might want to use a sniper rifle.
So you want to shoot Facebook? Okay, I get it. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, it is. Some page. That's where this is going to be a good discussion because depending on the page itself. Every once in a while, it's rare, but I will get broken down where I'm like, crap, I need to send, at least I can usually focus my thing here, but I will literally send keystrokes, which is rare, but sometimes it's the best tool, right? It's generally speaking not as reliable, and so I try not to do it, but I every once in a while still have to do it that way.
Well, I'm all about the duct tape solutions.
Yeah, well, which is another obvious key factor, right, is how long is it taking you to do this? Because over years I've built this up. For me, I can crank this stuff out in no time, right? So now that I've learned it and I've learned the magic, way to do this stuff, it's really straightforward for 95% of websites. It's straightforward where I can programmatically enter the stuff. It took me a while to get there, right? And that's why what I wanted to do is today we're going to focus just on Facebook, but I'm going to create a couple other videos logging into the other web pages to show, depending on what the page has behind it. And that's what here, this outer HTML, this is the actual HTML on the page, right? That's creating this page. Depending on what they've entered, that's what we'll use in our script.
Okay.
So this tool, it is like if you right click here and say inspect element, this will bring up, it's a similar type thing overall. This is showing you the HTML. Notice here it says it's highlighted the input name equals email, right?
Yes.
So let me, actually, let me do this. Let me grab that, minimize this, right? And now I'm going to drag this up here onto the same spot. Now see this outer HTML here? Mm-hmm. Basically, it's going to be the,
I see, yeah.
Spot. It's the same information. Why I love this tool is, holy cow, the first time you look at this kind of stuff, right, all this stuff, it's very, very confusing. There's incredibly amount, and if you look at actually how much is on the page, if we expanded all these things, there's probably, a couple thousand lines of code on the load page. Whereas all we want to look at is basically a couple elements in this HTML code. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. You know what? I'll go ahead and close this too. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you was here. All right, we're on here. See how it says name, email?
Yes.
The ID, email? If we look in here, this is the HTML code that's building this input box, right? Notice it says input name equals email and ID equals email, right? That is where these things are pulling from. It's this outer HTML, and it's just, those are important, right? They're very helpful because if either of these or both are populated, excuse me, I can use these instead of excuse me, trying to grab the actual, like, using tag names and things. So when and more often than not, an actual input form is available. So what you're trying to do is find the best way to programmatically grab this input field. Or I think you the other day, how about you said control, right?
Yeah,
Which,
yeah, because that's how I think of them.
sure, and technically it still could be a control. It's just that it's you won't see it. The syntax be it's let's call it a control written in HTML, right?
So okay, so hold on. So let's say that this was I was making a GUI.
Mhm.
That email, that field that you have that has email in it, and the ID that has email in it, that
Mhm.
would be the same as if I was building a GUI. It would be the associated variable with it. So you'll
That's right.
use
Yes.
okay. So you'll
Yeah.
use that in your code to say, hey, I want to target this thing.
Yeah.
This
That's a great.
thing is email.
Yeah, and it's a great comparison because as an AutoHotkey, you don't have to define the name or the ID, right? You don't have to define an AutoHotkey the variable to say
Mhm.
I want to programmatically be able to grab this thing, right?
Yeah.
You can, and hopefully someone did. Now let's actually. I think it was maybe Pinterest. I was looking at it. So notice here. So under name, they have ID as the name, but they don't have an ID. Like, this is crazy, right? Why would you
Mhm.
name your name field ID and then have the ID actually blank? um, but anyway, okay, that's weird. But you don't have to name them, and you can name them almost whatever you want, right? Um,
And I think you mentioned before, like sometimes they won't have anything in them.
that's right.
And
Yeah,
go another method.
yeah. Because what we're tackling today, this is a very special thing that companies, when they create their login, they spend a lot more time on these than a lot of other pages. More often than not, these will have either a name or an ID, right?
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
if we were on a different page, like if I was actually inside Amazon looking around and doing stuff, they often won't be named. But the login pages, more often than not, will be identified with either a name or an ID. And again, these are just elements inside the HTML tag, right? And they've defined them, and that's where it's like, if their HTML coder has taken the time to name them, because often they will write JavaScript code on the page to
You're
go.
muted.
What's that?
You're muted.
I'm muted. You can't hear me?
I'm getting on.
Well, all right. So basically, we're covering these are typically named, right? Oh, that's what I said. So JavaScript, the designers will write JavaScript code to go grab this ID and pull back stuff. And so that's why more often than not, they actually will be named. And when I say defined is a better term, because they will have JavaScript that says, I want to go get this. Now, if they're not named, we're not going to go into that too much today because it can be tedious. But what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to show you was, see this input up here says input 0 right
Mm-hmm.
in this header. If we look in here, so here, see it's the input tag. That's what that's
Yes.
pulling from,
Okay. Okay.
right? And so that's when one way, if these aren't defined, you can always say, well, get me an array, and that's what you'll probably recognize this with the brackets, right? It's an array, so there's multiple inputs on this page. Let me see if this will update. So that's the second input field, or third, sorry, we were discussing earlier about arrays and how if they're 1 based versus 0. HTML elements on a page are 0 based. Their arrays are 0 based. So this is in actuality the third element
Okay.
um,
Okay.
on the
Makes
page,
sense.
because it's number 2. So there's a 2, 1, 0, right? Um, but if it didn't have one of these things, you could grab it that way, right? But here's the catch: what if they added another input field over here, right? And then suddenly it'd be the fourth thing, which would be the third number here. But anyway, that's why it's not as robust, and it tends more likely to break when you start using like the tag names, and that's what makes these name and IDs very special because both of these, more often than not, are unique on the page. And so even if they insert a couple other things over here, this one will still have the name as what was it, email? Yeah, as
Yeah.
email, right? Regardless of what they throw in front of it or wherever, and that's what just makes it much more stable, right? And that's why when you see that, you're like, oh, thank you, whoever created this. Class name is another one you could use, and so this where it says class, we could use input text, which is often unique. It's an array, but it is, if you don't have, it's better than using the actual overall tag. It's more unique than that. And so if both name and ID are blank, I will jump to class. And then after class, I would probably defer to the input field. There are other ways to do it, but let's keep it simple today, and just demonstrate logging into that. So if you've seen, I have my one of my first videos where I talk about I'm going to launch my my script writer, right? So I don't have to write my own code because I'm a terrible typist. So I can now,
We're there.
I just launched this. This is what the little icon down here looks like. So now when I hold down the what in the world is that? The control key, I can say I need to get a pointer. And now here's the first question. So we have a couple questions. Let me get into that before we start writing code. We have to decide, do we want IE to grab the current open window, right, and start manipulating that and navigate to this Facebook page? Do we want to create a separate IE existence, right, and have that navigate to it? And so, of course, it depends on your, what your needs are and what you're trying to do. We could also build in logic that says, hey, if IE is currently running, grab it, and if it's not, launch it. And that one I'll do.
So you lost me there for a second.
Sure.
So you're saying that if I have Internet Explorer open, it'll navigate to the page that I want?
Well, it just depends how we write our script.
Okay.
And that's what I'm saying is, like, before we start writing code, we have to make that decision. Do I just want to get, can I assume, is it a safe assumption to say I'm only going to run the script when IE is already running?
Uh-huh.
And then if it is, I could say, hey, go get that active, get the active tab, and navigate on that active tab to the Facebook login page.
Now, we were talking about this before off camera, but I was telling you about how when I was doing C, I would give the user a bunch of options, A, B, or C, and then I just have to assume that they don't know to put A, B, or C. So when you usually write this, do you usually go for the to eliminate any kind of confusion, just make sure that it opens a new one? Or
it depends on what I'm doing, right? When I was working for a company, I worked in the database side of things, and I would try to do targeting off of people who've done activities on our website, right? Unfortunately, my internet the technology group couldn't give me a list of like the parts that we had. So crazily enough, I had to do web scraping to go to our own web page and grab the names of the parts, right? So for that instance, I always knew I was already in the middle of like looking at the parts, and I'm like, oh, here's a list of parts on this page I want. And so I just programmed that script to always get the current version of IE that's running, because I knew that's how I'd be using it.
Okay.
Right. But to your point, if I'm giving it to someone else, I will often write it where it always creates it from scratch, right? Or you can ask them, right? Prompt them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was thinking I was wondering if you would make a test right when it starts, like if it's like you set it up so that way if it already exists, if that window already exists, you just use that one. But if it doesn't, so is that normally what, like if you were doing it that way, would you? I guess I'd have to see more about how we're going through this to understand what you would need to do with that.
Yeah, but what I'd rather, I mean, you're spot on. That is definitely a decision process I typically go through, right? And I could show you the code. I can find one where I have it and say, hey, if if there is an existence of IE, go grab it, and if not, get the current one. But let's just say right now we're going to decide we want to launch a new window,
Okay. Okay.
a whole new existence of IE, right?
Okay.
Um, the other one, which is we need to know, of course, where is the page where you actually log in, right? The URL of that. And so that I was already here, and we don't here. It's got a lot of other junk to it, but I think that was just borrowing. So because I'm not logged in, so this we can just use this as the standard page, and if you're not logged in, this is the right page to use.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So we need to know where we want to go, and so now that we've decided that, let's start writing some code. And so now I have this built where I can hold down my control key and click and pointer, and I'm gonna create an IE object. Right. This is where I could get the pointer to the current IE window. Right. But we just discussed that. Here, I'm going to go ahead and create, and this is using the com object. So we don't need to know all this, right? But basically what this does is it creates a new instance of the Internet Explorer application, and I'm going to store a pointer to it or a handle to this in this PWB variable. Now, IE, as with actually most Office products like Excel and Word and PowerPoint, they start off invisible. So if I ran this and I left this off, or if I set this to false, where it says visible, if I typed in false here, it would actually create an instance of it, but we couldn't see it, right? It'd be running in the background, which is
okay.
Which I'm gonna show an example of it later of why you might do that, right? Depending on what you're doing. So now we have an existence of IE, or we will, and we've made it visible. And the very next thing we're going to do is we're going to navigate to that Facebook page, right? So again, here we're going to say page navigation, navigate to page, and here is where, all right, let's go back and get our, I do my best never to type anything.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So I'm going to put that on there. Now this would, and actually let's go ahead, I'm going to save it. And by the way, so these are my two hotkeys, right? The first one, I have a browser forward key on my keyboard, and that's going to reload the script, so I don't have to keep hitting save and reload it, right? And this one is going to launch the thing going forward. So I'm going to save it, I'm going to launch it, and down in the bottom right, we'll see that little green H, right? That's the default icon. And now when I hit my browser button, notice it just created IE and popped up in this window, right? But here's the thing, and notice I'm in here, but had I run this and actually sent in a value, we don't know if the page had loaded yet or not, right? Because depending on your speed of your computer, but two, your ISP and everything, and of course Facebook's server side too, right? All those things can interfere with the page actually loading, and you try to send it keys or send it values, and
it's not ready yet.
That's right, exactly. So in here, we're going to come back and we're saying, under page navigation, I have a wait for page to load. And what this is doing, this is a while loop, and it's just saying, hey, while either, and this is, see the PWB, right?
Yes.
That's in front of each of these.
Yeah.
That's the, while the IE window is either busy or the ready state is not for, and just says sleep for 1/10 of a second. And so it's going to keep doing this thing, looping until, let's go back here. You know what? I thought I had my view status bar. Where is that? Toolbars, status bar. Here we go. So see down here, see this?
Sorry, show me your mouse. Show me. Okay, yeah,
it's at the bottom.
Yeah.
It's already finished, and so it stopped showing it. But if we actually navigated, let's see if I can navigate to a page and if it'll change. Oh, on the left here, it abbreviated for a second, right? That is what we're monitoring on the this ready state, is that it would show you if it's. I'm sorry. A better stated way is the status bar is visually giving you a representation of, is it waiting, is it done, right? And that's what I think almost every browser, at the bottom of the page, it'll say waiting, waiting, waiting. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, because of Ajax calls and other stuff, it'll say done, and then it actually goes back to where it's loading and stuff, and it's confusing. But that's all this is doing, is basically saying, hey, create the IE window, make it visible, navigate to this page, and these two things are saying wait for the page to load before moving forward. And now let's redo this. So now when I save this, and the other thing to note is it will keep creating new windows because I'm not killing that old version, right? But so see, it was done so fast,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's probably in my cache too, but it's lightning fast. But again, programmatically, this is nice because now we don't have to worry about it, right? We got it there. So the next thing we're going to do is fill out that the login piece, right? And so we have a couple different ways we can do that. Let's go back to here, and we're on email. I'm just going to demonstrate it again here, right? This is the thing I want to fill in, and it has a name. We could either use name or ID.
So when you're using when you're using that tool, you're literally dragging it. You're clicking on that and dragging up.
That's right. Is once you hold down and then you see how it turns into that crosshairs,
mm-hmm.
and then I can go wherever I want on the IE.
And then when you release, it'll grab the information.
Yeah, it's dynamically. I wish I understood the code better. I looked at it. I actually tweaked. This is my own version of it because I got rid of a couple things that made the text bigger because it's usually a smaller window and smaller text, and on my eyes, it's just too small. But it's for me, it was over my head to understand exactly how it worked. But I believe it has read in the code for this page and is adding that red bracket around the element that I'm on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and another thing I should show you here is I'm going to click this and say, you know what? What if this didn't have, which is a good example. Oh, I closed it. What if it didn't have an example? But I can say show parent structure. In here is where I can look at the different values of where I am down here, but I could jump all the way up higher and higher, and suddenly I'm way up at the furthest part on the page. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
This whole structure, I wish I had, you know what? Let me see if I can do a, where is this annotate? I've never done this before, but I'm gonna draw. Can I draw? No. Select draw. Oh, here we go. Okay. So the document object model, which is basically, think of it as like the map to the web page. It's an inverse tree, and up at the top is right here would be all of the web page, right? And that's what this is right here, this HTML ID, right? We're at the very outskirts. It's the entire page, everything in it. As you go down, there's different levels, right?
And dependencies, all the dependencies?
Well, they're structured underneath it, and this is why if I could actually draw a better tree, it would help explain it. But this item here is under this, which is under the whole thing. But if let's say these IDs, the name and ID, weren't in existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
The input tag, this input tag of 1, is under a certain branch here. And if I can navigate to this branch or this branch and then say use the input tag, right, I don't have all the other input tags on the page to worry about.
Okay.
So the further down the tree you can go, like this login, and I'm on the draw thing. Now I got to figure out how to get out of the draw thing. That's not it. But the further down you go, yeah. Clear my drive. Sorry. There we go. The safer, the more reliable it's going to be, right? And so if I'm in here, see how that highlights? I'm this form ID. Mm-hmm. If this wasn't in existence, I could navigate down to here first and then say, now give me the input form that's under this instead of the whole page. Right?
And you'd be able to take a look at that, and you'd have a better like you could guess, shoot shot in the dark of what actually is part of what.
Right. Well, actually, what I can do is I can right-click on this tool. I can say use this element, and now this outer HTML, even though you can see it's a decent amount of code, right? Um, I know we both agree we don't like the wrapping, but in this case it is helpful. We could go in here and go and start looking at the HTML and see what's actually in there, right? And here, oh, lo and behold, I mean, we already knew that the names
Yes.
were identified, but it just, you're limiting where you're searching, right? Which can help you be more precise and more accurate and less likely to pull up the wrong entry field on the page, right? So that's it's a great tip to realize, look, if these aren't named, but something in the hierarchy above it is named, start there instead of the entire page.
But like you said, most pages, those two fields or
That's right.
those similar fields are going to be
Yeah,
pretty generic.
they have a unique one or the other or both. The name or the ID is filled in. Yeah, more often than not. Let's go back to that one. And so here, and we'll demonstrate both ways just so we can show the examples of it. I'm gonna. Oh, you know what? I don't need to do that because that'll stay on top. Go back to here. Come back to this window. All right, now, and let me turn off the view white space. Now I have my little handy dandy script here. Get from, or actually I want to set on page, right? Get would be, I want to get the data from that form, but that's not what I'm trying to do, right? I want to set it. So I want to set, and see how it says set ID is unique or ID with dashes. So IDs it is possible for the HTML developer to end up putting more than one ID with the same text value, with the same value, right? It's rare, but it is possible. And the code would just, it's just a little, actually, let's do both here. So here's the code for setting it when you know it's unique, and here's the code if it's not unique. Oh, I did the, no, that, set on page, set ID with dashes. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, my bad. I'm thinking of these. These are unique. It's the dashes. This on some pages it can be like this, right? And
Okay.
this, I'm typing it here.
Sometimes it'll be just spaces.
No, not spaces.
Not spaces. Full continuous word.
Yeah, but they'll put in a dash. Let me bring this over here so you can see it better, right? When there's a dash in there, unfortunately, this approach, it won't allow you to have a dash in it. So if I typed in email right here, it's fine. If I do email dash form, that would not work.
Okay.
Right? So what I would have to do is put it into here, right? This will work fine. It's one of those things, this is a little bit cleaner, although what I really should do is just teach this approach, and then it's always consistent.
Because with this one, that one that you had highlighted there, would that work for both ways?
This way works for both ways. Yeah, so you're better off just, hey, you know what? Let's say we want to do it by ID, and then we don't have to worry about it, right?
Okay.
And let me get rid of
Other than the length of code, the other one doesn't offer any specific advantage?
No.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
So this is probably, if you're learning it from scratch, start with this.
Yeah.
You'd say?
I would, and then you just stick with it, right? You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So we're going to set email to, I'm trying to remember, let's see, that was, because I used this is my fake profile. Don't I look nice? It looks just like mine. I think that is that account. Well, figure it out, right? So let's actually, we're going to test this. We're going to save it, reload
so
it.
You've targeted that element, and that's what you're going to put into it.
Yeah, and you know what? I forgot to mention one other thing. So see where this part right here, this is where I'm targeting that element, the ID of email.
Mm-hmm.
I could say set the outer HTML, oops, if I could type HTML to a certain value, right? To blah, blah, right? That would actually, it would actually rewrite the page locally on my computer to crap. But see, this is the outer HTML, right? I can adjust the full thing. I could even add an element if I wanted to or whatever. But See here it says value is blank. Let's go back in here and let's put I'm gonna just choose I don't want it to do that. But now watch when I drag this up here. So see how value says this, right? That's how I know over back on my script, I want to set the value. I'm going to change this back and I'm going to set the value to this email address. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And now when I save it, reload it, and let's get rid of this one too, just not to confuse people, and launch it. So notice I just launched it, but see how that popped it in there?
Yes.
Right. Now let's stick with this same approach here, and we know this one is just pass, right? And this is why also like a lot of sites will say email and password, right? This one just says pass. So I'm going to cheat.
Now, okay, so so you have name and ID. Do I have to differentiate those when I go in and write the code? So let's say you do?
If this could have been, right? This could have been password and this could be pass. It depends on which one of these, which method you're using to populate it. And we're going to cover. I should have stuck with this. Actually, I have ID, don't I? So let's stick with the ID. We're going to switch over to name here after we do both with the ID.
Okay.
All right. But for now, let's stick with this. So I'm going to borrow.
Yes. Okay. I see. You do have get element by ID, so it's grabbing that field rather than. And you would have another one get ID by name.
No, but let's just wait for it.
Okay.
It is different. So I just copied and pasted and swapped it out. But here I want my very special, the stupidest password. I didn't have ever, but that's close enough. So I'm going to save this, reload it, and let me close this window, right, and launch it. And now notice it's populated. We don't know what that is, but we just populated, right? They've have it as a password form, so it shows you star or the dots, circles, whatever, in place of it, right? And then of course we're going to want to log in. But you know what? Before we do the login, let's go back to with your question, right? And let me make sure that they're both pass.
And those are both email.
Right. So I'm going to comment out both of these, and I'm going to come back into my little tool, set on page, and this time we're doing name. And so now notice name can be, so I you know what, I got them wrong earlier. It's been a while since I've talked through it. Names, even though more often than not they are unique, it's not illegal to have more than one name that has email, right? It's very, very rare where the designer will reuse a name on a page. It occasionally happens, but it's very rare. But that's why here we're going to put in, and I'm going to borrow from here, right? I'm going to put in email, and the only difference is this is an array, right? So this is the first one. If I wanted the second one, I would use 1. If I wanted the third one, I'd put 2. It's a 0-based array. Does that make sense?
Yes. And that's part of the information when you got the input. Is that for the input? Like right at the top right there, you have input element 1. At the very top of that. Is that dealing with that?
No, that's the tag name.
Okay.
See where this says name? And also, if we look back in here, right, this is literally, I mean, these are good questions, though, because I never understood this. It didn't dawn on me that, like, if I look at this HTML around it, look, they're defining name as email. They're defining ID as email. That's what I always thought these were, like, some special things. And they are, right? But it's more, it's just easier to understand if, like, oh, they've just, in the HTML, they've defined a parameter, a key value pair, right? We're going to store under name, we're going to make it email. And this is breaking it out for you, which is what's handy.
Yes.
It's to emphasize that those are very popular elements to, what they have in this tag, on this HTML. And more often than not, they're populated. So this tool has designed to show them to you, right? Very easily, conveniently, instead of you having to read through this right, and find
So
it.
okay, so where would that element come into position? The one that you were just talking about, where you're going to set its position by name, and then you have the position 0. Where does that come into play? Where would it be 0? Where would it be 1? Where would it be
Well,
2?
that's what I was saying is names, unlike IDs. If I and like caveat, I'm not a programmer, right, and I know enough HTML to get in trouble. My understanding is IDs. It's required if I tried to create a page that had more than one element on a page that had the same ID, that it's a quote unquote illegal. I don't know if it would crash the page, right? But it's illegal. You can't do it. Names, you can have more than one thing with the same name. It's
Mm-hmm.
just very rare that you run into it.
And how would I? Okay, so let's say that is the case. How do I know which one I'm going for?
Honestly, the easiest way is just to say you try it.
Okay.
Right. So you know what? That's a great. But let me show you, because the thing is, how do you troubleshoot that? Right. What if you're filling something else in? You're like, what the hell? Right. How do I know what I'm getting? Um, so I'm gonna do this. I got the name right. And that already had text in. It's where I was going. I want to get from the page, and let's comment this out real quickly. I'm gonna say get from page. Get from page. Um, named array, and I'm going to say get the email, and I'm going to get the value, or I could get the HTML, right? Both of these are still, so I'm going to come over here, and I'm not even going to store it, right? I'm just going to say display a message box of the element that has the name tag of email, the very first one, and show me what value is there, right? So I'm going to save
Okay.
this, relaunch it. Unfortunately, it's gonna still launch a new version of it, which is fine. Oh, in it. Man, I don't know if that got. Let me close this other one too. Oh, because it's going to a blank page.
Okay. Okay.
This is where, even though we're doing this, what I would do is say, you know what? For now, I'm gonna comment out all of this.
So you could put, okay, so what I think you're going to do is you're going to put a pre-value in there and you're going to test to see if that's the right element.
That's right.
Okay,
And
okay.
what I'm gonna do also is I'm gonna get the pointer to. This is just the function that it calls. I'm going to put it down below. You don't have to know what this is, but this WB gets the active IE window, right? And so now what I can do is I can type in. I'm going to type in something here, and now when I run this, it's not going to go create a new instance, right? It will look at the last active window and
Okay.
go and pull that information.
And now you can be confident that it is position 0.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
of course
okay.
you could also try putting in there, but what I will do is I'll be like, you know what, where in the world am I? And so instead of doing that, the other thing I could do is I could say, you know what, get me the outer HTML, and this can help me allude to me where I am, where I'm actually grabbing things from. Because honestly, it's the troubleshooting thing that really, takes the time, and learning little
Hmm.
tips like this is very helpful, because you're like, sometimes when you're stuck, and I'll do a demonstration code here, but I don't want to program it, but let me show you. So there's the get. Let's do set on page, and we'll do tag name, right? So this is where we would put in input, and here I just have a value here where we would start with 0, but when you're doing input, tag get elements by tag name, there can be dozens of other input things that tags on the page that you're not aware of.
Hmm.
And it's really, that's why I avoid the best I can using tag names, because they're very, 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 very common on a page. There's so many more of them. I'd say it's like a logarithmic relationship, as opposed to an ID or a name. There's 1 to 2 to 3, right? And then class name would be like there's 1 to 2 usually. It's honestly, I don't even use these anymore. I use the class name. but it's a little more confusing when you're not used to it. So that's why I don't stress it in this. But it's highly reliable. It's usually unique, and I'm like, you know what? It's my go-to now because it's almost always on the page, and it's I don't have to fish around. Even though these are there, I'm like, okay, you know what? Class name is awesome. The tag names, they are still, don't get me wrong, they're reliable, especially if you can go down the page some and isolate again. If you can isolate just this area and then say, get me the input tags in this area, right? Okay, that'll be much more reliable. But more often than not, I do my best not to use tag name because it's just adds for long-term maintenance. Things change and unexpected results. That makes sense?
Yes, it does. I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So other things haven't worked out properly, so you're going deeper and deeper into this stuff and trying new tools in your toolkit.
Yeah, and it's like, you know what? I go with what I, from my experience, is the most reliable and consistent and whatever, and then you keep backing out until you can find a reliable way to get it, right? And all of these, from my experience, are still more reliable than sending keystrokes, right? It's the sending, especially another point to consider is if you're running the code on your computer and then you're going to run it on more than one computer or give it to somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where people have other scripts running and they have other hotkeys that do stuff, or they have, just different settings and their the different even extensions or something, right? The different things that are visible might change those tabs and
Yes.
it
Yeah.
break. When you're programmatically saying, hey, for this page, grab this spot and this name, it's just much more reliable. All right, so we did the both the name and the ID. I mean, we could finish up with the name. Did we? I don't remember. Did we actually?
We put in all we have now is your email and the password. Now we need to actually submit that.
Right. So that's why let's stick now. We're going to stick with ID. And you know what? Actually, that's a good question. Is I don't remember here. We're going to come up here. We need to click this button, right? And notice, that is, see, like, what a weird name, right? It has an ID. It doesn't have a name. It has an ID. And again, notice how down here, this ID, right? That's what this is. All this is a cheat sheet for what's in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both of these. But we're going to use that ID, and that is by ID. So great. I'm going to copy that one and just throw in that text. But here, we don't want to get any value or set a value. We want to click it, right? So click is a function call that you can do on an object, as the other stuff are, right? It's just this. We're going to say, now go click that ID.
No, this is just a simulated click, or is this, you're not actually going to be clicking on it, right?
That's a great question, because I don't have a good enough accurate answer that I feel I can say with confidence. Here's the thing. Web pages more and more are this. I think I tested the other day just because I had never done this, and I think it worked. But it'll work on most pages where you can say click this, and it'll simulate on, I'd say, 85% of pages nowadays that you actually click the button. Some web pages have it built into it to literally look for like a mouse click down. It's called an event, right? The mouse click down, mouse click up. Same thing with filling out these things. Some of them will say, you know what? Even though this value got set, I never saw a keyboard entry here and a key button down and key button up.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so that is very rare. The clicking one, I run into that pretty frequent. Like I said, what I say, 85% of the time you don't have an issue, but it's somewhat frequent, and it's becoming more and more so because people are trying to stop bots and everything, right? So they're trying to make it harder for people to automate doing what we're doing. Even though this to me is like, this is legitimate. I just don't want to log in every time, right? I'm not trying to do anything wrong. I just want to speed up this process of manually having to log back in every time. But it is one I'm not quite good enough to say. I don't think it sends the exact same thing as a click, as a mouse click. right? It's
Mm.
not a control like an AutoHotkey that I say send, the click event. And even though that actually is a way, that's where Jackie showed me in a script how to send a mouse click or a keyboard event with sending the keystrokes of it to the ID. So it's a weird combination where I'm not actually triggering the JavaScript stuff with the event and firing it, which is the way I try to do it now. But you can isolate it and send the click, but you're not literally hitting tab and hitting enter, right? It's
Okay. Okay.
that. But it gets really confusing, in
But with the way we're
complex.
going to be doing this click, we're not actually going to have the page open. It can be in the background doing its own thing, or
That's right. Absolutely. Yes. Which is another great benefit of all the stuff, which was actually um, one of the things I wanted to demonstrate here in a bit of, hey, what if you don't want to see this login page at all? Right? What you can do, this is when I would say, you know what, I want to create a new window. I want to keep it hidden, right? I'm not going to have it visible. It's going to navigate to this page, wait for it to load, fill out this form with both values, hit the click, and when it finally goes to the next page, then make it visible,
uh-huh.
right? So all of that is invisible to the user. The other great thing, which I know from talking to you with computer resources, right? When you keep things invisible, I'm making this number up, but I think it's like 100 times faster to process, because actually building the GUI and all that crap, it takes a lot of resources for your computer.
Well,
And
yeah,
when
definitely.
it's not visible, it's like, wow, I didn't expect that big of a difference. Like even in stuff I've automated in Excel, where in Excel I can say, stop updating the screen, go do all of this stuff, and then when I'm done, go update the screen. And when I've timed that one, and when I don't freeze it, and freeze meaning stop updating the screen, it was like, it saves like 2/3 of the time it takes when you're actually visual, having it
Well,
represented.
that makes perfect sense because you'll have games or applications
Yeah,
where if you change its settings, its graphic settings, you can improve its performance. Well, if you can change its graphic settings to 0, then if changing it,
right.
right?
Yes,
So
yes, that's right. That's yeah. And I wanted to ask Jackie that because I've read about some other things where what they call it is they're like, oh, and this is a headless browser, and I'm like, what? I don't even know what in the world that means. And I finally Googled. I found an article today where it's like, oh, it's a browser that doesn't have any sort of a GUI representation, which is kind of ironic, right? Because with a browser, of course, it's a computer, it's a person looking and browsing, but it's basically the browser type thing functionality without having a visual representation, right? And the argument for it is because it's so much faster, right? You're not trying to do all this other stuff, so it's just really fast. Well,
it actually does make a lot of sense. That does make a lot of sense.
but what I don't understand, what I wanted to ask Jackie, because he's knowledgeable on this, is to say, when I just make this hidden, in effect, do I have a headless browser, right? Because it's not visible, and I don't understand if the other tools that are a headless browser, if they actually are doing even more where you don't have it trying to do stuff, right? That's what I don't know. All right, enough digression. So now we still
So
have
you have,
this.
you put in your function, your click function. Is this? Do we have to add any parameters to that?
No, no,
Okay.
not. I don't start with adding them. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And we switched over here where we're just going to access the last active window, right? So I'm going to save this and reload it, and then we're just going to go back to this page, and I'm going to hit my hotkey, and it's going to fill in this. You know what? Let's do this. Um, so now, when I do this, you're going to see I hit this. It filled in this, and it popped up saying here right before we click this, right? Otherwise, it literally would have been so fast, you probably wouldn't even seen this get filled in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to hit OK, and with any luck, oh, and it just tried. I think it's the wrong email address for this account, but it did try to do it. Let me go back a page, and let me see if that is the right one. So we're here. It just filled that in. Hit OK. There it goes, and it logged me in.
Very nice. Very
Right.
good.
So that we could put in a routine. Now, back to your question. let me. Well, I'll leave this where it is for now. If at times you hit this click thing and it doesn't, you don't see anything happen, right? A quick thing to test. There's a couple things I would try. Is I would go down here and say click, and this fire event change, right? So you would adapt this to right here, right? So we're basically mimicking.
Okay. Yeah.
But we're gonna. Oh, and actually, I should have borrowed. Sorry, I should have borrowed this. There we go. Oh, but I missed the. This is yeah. Oop. So this is still on this function. This, it clicks it, but then we do this thing called, remember I mentioned earlier, events, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to fire an event on this element with the on change, and then there's a second one that if that doesn't work, you can do the exact same thing. Let's just replicate that, and we would change this to on click, right? Let me get rid of that now. So you try this first. If this doesn't work on its own, add this one. If it doesn't work, comment, don't use it, try this one. More often than not, I'd say like roughly 85% of the time, this will work. If that doesn't work on its own, one of these two other ones will work another 5 to 7% of the time. And then if none of these work, that's when you're into creating a custom event on the page and having to fake signaling it, and that gets, even for me, I'm like, I'm getting there at being able to do it reliably, but it's pretty complex. And thankfully, it's right now still pretty rare where it comes to that.
But for people just getting into this, if they're just using it to log into sites or whatever, most of these things, they're not going to be too much of an issue.
More often than not, more often than not, this should work, right? This or a combination of one of these two will work.
And it was you saying that when you start getting into deeper stuff, that's where you start to have the more customization problems.
Yeah. So I'm going to log out just so I'm logged out of IE in general. And let's demonstrate that other approach that I mentioned. So I got rid of getting the current window. We're going to re-enable this stuff, right? So now it's going to create a new version. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to make this, actually, you know what? I'm going to move this. I'm going to cut that, and I'm going to move it down here. And so what's going to happen here is it's going to create a new IE window, right? But I notice I just removed it entirely. I just moved it down here. So the default is for IE to be invisible.
Okay.
Right? So I'm not going to make it visible. So it's going to create an IE window. It's going to navigate the Facebook without showing me anything. Wait for it.
You had a message box. How about put the message box just before it makes it visible so we can see that everything's been added to it. And now after that, then it's going to make it visible.
Sure. All right.
So we can see where we are in our code.
Yep. And let me go ahead. I'll just comment that out so we don't have it.
I was thinking that, yeah.
All right. So we're ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. All right. So I'm going to hit my hotkey. And we're already there, right? Notice there's no, oh, you know what? Let me show you this. So let's go here to taskbar, task manager. And in here, we'll see somewhere should be an IE window. I thought it, let me make this bigger. Here we go. Oh, where'd it go? I saw something. And it might have been nested under an AutoHotkey. Often, if the other script is launching it, it'll nest it. I don't actually use this task. Oh, there we go. So, that's the Facebook. Yeah. That's that. But what I wanted to see was there will be an existence of IE somewhere running. Oh, here it is. Internet Explorer, right? It's running and it's in existence, but it's not visible. You don't see it over here, right? And actually, let me see if I think I can even. Oh, that's the other. See, I use a different tool where I can look at it closer, but it would show us the instance of it and that it's not visible. But that's how you can kind of see it is running. It's just not visible. Now, the second we hit here, It just, bam,
Pops it up.
throws it
Yep.
open. Yeah, so it's a nice thing of like, well, do you want to actually see that process? I typically always make it visible when I'm first developing because I want to see what in the world's going on. And then after that, I might do what I just did. Say, you know what, now I don't care about seeing all that because I speed it up by doing that and just let it just load. When it's finally done, I'll make it visible.
So now, okay, so now that we're logged in, we have the page open there, we can do other things with it as well. We can
Sure.
make a posting or
We could automate doing that, right? So what I would do is come in here and say, hey, what's on our mind? Oh, look, here's the name of X
and we
H.
would just go through the same process that we
That's
did for
right.
logging.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Although the only thing we should have done also was to add this page sleep after we click this, right?
Okay,
We'd want
yeah.
that in there again to wait for that page to load, wait to go to the next page, and then try to fill in that value. And after we fill it in, I guess on that one we'd probably hit the enter key. Oh no, there's a post button. So once you click in there,
Uh-huh.
let's see, is that still the same? Now notice you're in this composer ID input box, right? And so then you would start working off this thing. And then,
So okay, so would you need to activate the first one first, or could you go right for the second one?
probably no. That's a great question because sometimes this whole form already actually exists.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a layer that's not visible, and
Mm-hmm.
so I would say that's one of those things you try it, and you're like, hey, does that actually already exist?
So if, for example, let's say if it didn't, I could just generate maybe a click event into that box to trigger
You
the
may
next
not
layer.
even have to. I'm sorry, did you say it did or didn't exist?
Let's say it didn't exist, the other layer, so that way I'd
Okay,
have to
then
actually
yes,
click into it.
that's
So I
right.
could click into it and then get the next field.
Right, right. Yeah, and so it's just you keep playing with it, right? Of like, oh, I'm going to click here, and that's what triggered, this now is a window. Um, there's another one which in the tool that I have, right? You can say focus. So that is the same. It's the same structure as this, right? And so let's just put that in here. I didn't have that, but this focus it means like basically focus the cursor in that spot, which
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is like clicking, right? It's another good one that when you're
You can
trying to
do
do
that
that,
with the AutoHotkey GUIs as well. You can use focus
yeah,
too. Yeah. Now, so to make a like expand on it. So what I could do is I could create something where I have 10 accounts. I have 10 accounts. I can dump a message into a variable. I can log. I can have it log into my first account, post that message, log out, and
yep,
then log into my second account, post that same message again, and I can do that 10 times,
right,
100 times, or 1,000 times.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, this is why web scraping is and so to me scraping means I'm taking something off, right? That's where
Mhm.
the term originated from. I actually bought, I think, webpasting.com just because I'm like, this is where I'm putting information on, right? But they're both incredibly useful depending on what you're trying to do, and that ability to be able to, like, this is what I was mentioning the other day at work. At most companies, the tools that you use, most companies nowadays are building a browser to be the interface to their tool, right? And so let's say you're using like Tableau or SQL stuff or whatever, business objects. The tool that you use to actually fill in their form is a browser, right? So the second that I can now automate what I collect, what I click, and what I do in a browser enables it so much more of being able to help me, do a lot of the stuff I'm trying to do, right? Obviously, logging into web pages helpful, but I had some that would take it. So I had two systems at work that used browsers to their interface. And one was a CMS, which was the content management system, which would store our stuff. The other one we didn't have a way that our clients, that was the destination, right? Where we would put it in there and that's what would get pushed to the web page. But our clients, the company was so large, right? We had thousands of people doing stuff. They would enter. They're like the communications people, not technical people. They would go into Form A, which is overall simpler, and enter their information they wanted posted. And then someone had to manually go log in, look at what they did, and manually transfer this information into the other tool, which was also a browser. And so I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm doing this day, So I automated the process where I would log into this one, hit a button, and it would go into the other one and create a new entry and transfer it all over there, where it used to take like 6 hours to do, and I would get it done in like 8 minutes total. Right?
I had a few months ago, somebody was asking me if what they were looking for was something. We can use the example of Facebook, for example, but what they wanted was 2 times a day. They want to log in, post something up, and then log back out. And they wanted it to be, at 8 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock at night. So this is how they would go about doing that kind of thing.
It's one way. And so here's where it's expanding the scope of what we're talking about. But a web browser is like with other things, it's an API, right, that will connect to the remote server at Facebook, right? It's a graphical way that we can interact with Facebook's servers, right? And so you can manually, and we're using a browser with HTML, which has thousands of lines of crap, tens of thousands of lines of stuff, hundreds of thousands of lines of stuff that we don't necessarily need if all we want to do is post an article, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, some things like Facebook have a web services API, right? And what that is Facebook has set up a place where you can programmatically, you don't have to log into a browser, you don't have to do all the stuff. All you want to do is say, this is the name of my article, these are my credentials. Sorry, let's start off with the credentials. Here's my username and password I'm going to pass to it. I want to create a new entry, and this is the title, and this is the text in the URL, and just push it, right? The amount of data that's transferred is like, let's say each page here, it's not. Let's say it's a meg. The other way is like 10K, right? It's ridiculously smaller. You can be very, very specific. It is definitely more technical, right? But you think this is the way I was showing you, web scraping is reliable. The other way, once you get it down, you can do hundreds of thousands of things, right? And it's very reliable. It's more so. So I'm just saying there are different ways you can go about it, right?
Okay, let's before we go for any more, let's go back to what we have on the page there. Is there anything that, so let's say if I wanted to do this right now, what do I need in order to get this done? So I see that you're calling into functions. Are those built-in functions, or are these functions that I need to create?
They're the functions, and let's go ahead and I'm going to delete this just so I can do it again. So in my tool, my web scraping tool, right? This is just I'm hitting a hotkey to show the menus, right? And we're going to say pointer. I want to get pointer from IE window, right? Or this is the one we use, is the get an existing pointer. What I've done here is when I hit this, it goes and grabs the code, copies it to my clipboard, and then pastes it into whatever window you're in. And that's where I have stored this function that I think maybe Jethro or somebody wrote, which is like I said, I've never actually.
But in order for me to do this right now, I would have to get a copy of that.
That's right.
Okay.
Or, I mean, there are, not to confuse you, there are different functions, right? But you need a function if you want to connect to a current existence of IE in some way. You have to figure out, how am I going to get that window, right? How am I going to get a pointer to it? This is my way. I even have other ones that are similar to it, right? But this is the one that I've found works very reliably, so I use it.
Let's say if I froze my screen right now and I copied out everything that's on the screen right now, it would work?
Sure.
I would need nothing else.
No, that's why here normally I think you've seen I have like an include defaults thing and stuff.
Yeah.
I have nothing else. The only thing that's running is in this script, right? There's no other.
So if I was watching this video right now, I could copy everything except for Kathy the Automator and the stupidest password, and theoretically it should work.
Right. Nope. That's right.
Okay.
Yep. Actually, right now you could copy that and it would work. Right. I'm going to go back in after this and change it.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's the beauty of doing it this way. Is this it'll be highly reliable. I can give this to you can copy it and paste it, and it's gonna assuming you have IE installed on your computer, right? It is going to be very likely that it'll work.
Now, I don't usually use hot strings that much. I've started to get more into them, but I would want to probably take the line that starts with pointer to open IE. I'd want to put that in its own file and just include that when I want to use it. Is that
That's why I can delete this
mm-hmm.
and it'll run because I've done exactly what you said. I have in my library. I have it there, but I made sure I left it, in the actual script. But you can put it there, and then you don't have to have it every time you call it.
Okay, and then you just put it in there so that because you probably share that kind of script with people, and they don't have this,
Right.
so you can just paste it in and give them the whole script, and they can run it.
It's more. I mean, it got back to the script I wrote for helping write code. This is what you can download, right? And then you have everything in here, and that's where it's stored in that. So
okay.
It by default, when I say get pointer to window, it dumps in, this is what you actually need to call the function, but I included the function even though I don't need it, but that's what you're saying, right? I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
I don't know if other people have it or not, so I'm just going to dump it in there. But you don't have to have it if it's in your library, right?
I'd done the same thing with GDI Plus, where I made a script, and I don't know if the person has GDI Plus in their library, so I just included everything to do with it in it.
Right. And that's where, in this example, it's fine, right? Big deal. It's what, 12 lines or whatever. On GDI Plus, it's what, a couple thousand lines?
Yeah, it's probably like 5,000-6,000 lines.
Okay, yeah, all right. See, that was, my screen clipping one we're looking at the other day. You'll see it has a lot of the GDIP functions, but I went through and grabbed exactly what I needed because it was just like, holy cow, that's a big library. Which, again, memory-wise, it's nothing, right?
Yeah.
But I just didn't want people to have stuff that they don't need, right? I like to break it down.
Well, as far for my example, like they don't even need to touch the code, right?
Yeah.
It's just an icon of a script.
And in that case, you're better, I would say, like, oh man, just leave the whole thing in there and don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Mine was also like, I just wanted to understand I was curious what it was using, right? And then it was interesting. It actually, by looking through the code and how they kept self-referencing other functions within that overall library, it helped me realize the value of functions, right? Because they would keep recalling their own functions, passing different parameters to it, and that got me thinking more and more about the value of having functions to do one thing. Like here, I have a function. I don't remember what I called it, but it leaves this in there. Turns this into. I think I have it with the navigate, because typically I'll navigate to a page, and then I wait for it to load, right? And I have this. I'm like, well, why don't I just have this as a function call? And tell it how long I want to sleep, and that way it's all in one line.
That would be right there, right next to your Facebook, your parameter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then I don't have to. Yeah, I could actually. We could even. I don't want this. This is already complex enough, but it would be very easy to dump this into a function and do exactly that. Right. But yeah.
Well, this was very informative.
Awesome.
I'm definitely gonna start playing around with some of this stuff now.
Cool. I think you brought up really good questions that to me, I didn't think to explain. So this was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this.
Awesome. All right, we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah.
And I'll put a link in the notes here to Hellbound's channel, and we will maybe make some more doing stuff like this. I think it's very helpful.
Yeah, I have an idea for what I can cover. It's something that most people will never cover. So
Cool.
So it's not very useful. It's not necessarily useful, quote unquote, but it'll be, interesting, entertaining, hopefully.
Awesome. All right. Cheers.
Okay.